The great council chamber buzzed with the low hum of 1,000 different species, each representing worlds that had bent the knee to the Galactic Federation over the past millennium. Ancient beings with crystalline bodies sat beside slug-like creatures that oozed wisdom, while bird-like entities perched on specially designed platforms. At the center of it all, the High Chancellor Vexithara raised her forearms, calling for silence. Fellow beings of the Council, her voice echoed through translators that converted her clicking language into something each species could understand. Today we address a matter of grave importance. The third planet of the Sol system has been marked for integration. A ripple of confusion swept through the chamber. Elder Zeftuk, whose people had been among the first to join the Federation, extended his neck forward.
Chancellor, surely you jest.
The Sol system? That backwater cluster barely registers on our long-range sensors. Vexithara's mandibles clicked in what her species considered amusement. Indeed, Elder. The inhabitants call their world Earth and themselves humans. Our preliminary scouts report a civilization that has only recently achieved spaceflight. They still use chemical propulsion and have barely established colonies on their own moon. The chamber erupted in what could only be described as cosmic laughter. Species that had conquered star systems before humans had discovered fire found the very notion absurd. Commander Kilthavar of the warrior caste slammed his massive fist against his chair. Chancellor, why waste the Council's time with such primitives? Send a single battlecruiser. They'll surrender within moments of seeing our technology. My thoughts exactly, Vexithara replied, her compound eyes glittering with predatory satisfaction. However, there are complications that require Council approval for military action. She gestured, and holographic displays materialized above each delegate's position. Images of Earth appeared, showing blue oceans, green continents, and white clouds swirling in atmospheric patterns. To the assembled Council, it looked like any of 10,000 garden worlds they had catalogued over the centuries. The planet is remarkably rich in resources, Vexithara continued. Fresh water, diverse ecosystems, and mineral deposits that could fuel our expansion for generations. More importantly, the humans have developed something our xenobiologists find interesting. Dr. Melthas, the Federation's leading expert on species integration, floated forward in his containment suit. The humans display an unusual psychological trait. They form emotional attachments not just to their own species, but to other life forms on their planet. They've domesticated hundreds of species and show genuine affection for them. Our psychologists believe this makes them ideal candidates for docile integration. The Council murmured approval. Emotional species were always easier to control. Give them comfort and they rarely cause trouble. Furthermore, Dr. Melthas added, their military technology is laughably primitive. They still use projectile weapons and chemical explosives. Their most advanced space vessel barely reaches 1% of light speed. Integration should be swift and painless. Elder Yithmora, whose species had perfected the art of gentle conquest, spoke in her soothing tones. Have we attempted communication? Sometimes primitive species respond well to a demonstration of our benevolence. Unnecessary, Commander Kilthavar growled. We've studied their historical records. They're constantly at war with each other over resources, territory, and ideology. A fractured species cannot mount effective resistance against the Federation. Vexithara nodded approvingly. The commander speaks truth. Human society is divided into nearly 200 separate governing bodies, each with different languages, customs, and goals. They cannot even agree on how to address their own planetary climate changes. Such disunity makes them incapable of coordinated defense. The holographic displays shifted to show human cities, with their primitive architecture and ground-based transportation systems. To beings who had mastered gravity manipulation and energy matter conversion, human civilization looked like something a child might build with basic construction toys. I propose we follow the standard integration Protocol 7, Vexithara announced. A show of force to demonstrate our technological superiority, followed by demands for unconditional surrender. Once their governing bodies capitulate, we begin resource extraction and population management. What level of force are we discussing? Asked Senator Quilnith, whose insectoid features betrayed no emotion. Minimal. Perhaps disable their communication satellites. Demonstrate our weapons capabilities by targeting some uninhabited areas. Once they see our ships in their skies, they'll realize resistance is futile. We estimate complete surrender within 72 of their local time units. The vote was unanimous. Not a single council member saw any reason to concern themselves with prolonged military action. Earth's integration would be a routine matter, filed away between the subjugation of the crystal miners of Rigel 7th and the agricultural worlds of the Centauri cluster. As the council dispersed, species representatives chatted casually about the upcoming integration. Some expressed mild curiosity about human art and culture, wondering if it might provide momentary entertainment. Others discussed the logistics of resource extraction and optimal population distribution across Federation worlds. None of them noticed the small data packet that had been intercepted by long-range sensors 3 cycles earlier. Deep in the Federation's vast computer networks, an automated system had cataloged and filed a transmission that had originated from the Sol system. The message was brief, broadcast in multiple human languages and directed toward several nearby star systems. It was a simple greeting, an attempt by humans to contact other intelligent life. The translation software had processed it efficiently. Hello, we are the people of Earth. We come in peace, seeking friendship among the stars. We hope that whoever receives this message will understand that while we are young in the cosmos, we are eager to learn and to share what we have discovered about the universe. The message included mathematical principles, artistic expressions, and recordings of human music. It spoke of cooperation, curiosity, and hope. To the Federation's analysts, it had seemed exactly what they expected from a primitive species, naive, emotional, and touchingly optimistic. What they had failed to recognize was something far more significant embedded in that transmission. Between the mathematical formulas and artistic expressions was something that no other species in the galaxy had ever included in first contact messages: detailed analysis of human history, including extensive documentation of every war, conflict, and survival story their species had endured. The humans had sent not just a greeting, but a warning disguised as an introduction. They had told the cosmos exactly what they were capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction. But the Federation's translation systems had interpreted it as entertainment, filing the historical records under primitive cultural expressions without recognizing them for what they truly were: a species' resume of survival against impossible odds. The Council had made their decision to invade Earth based on incomplete information, cultural superiority, and the absolute certainty that no primitive species could possibly pose a threat to their 1,000-year-old empire. They would soon discover how wrong they were. 3 Federation warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, their massive hulls gleaming with the accumulated technology of 1,000 conquered worlds. The lead vessel, the inevitable Dawn, stretched nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been breached in 2 centuries of conquest. Fleet Commander Vorthak stood on the bridge, his reptilian features set in confident satisfaction. Around him, his mixed-species crew moved with the casual efficiency of beings who had performed this routine dozens of times before. Integration operations were so common that the Federation had developed standardized procedures, complete with timing charts and statistical probabilities. Long-range sensors confirmed the third planet's location, reported Lieutenant Zeltar, her crystalline form chiming softly as she worked. Multiple artificial satellites in orbit, just as intelligence predicted. Primitive chemical-fueled rockets, basic communication arrays, no sign of advanced defensive systems. Exactly as expected, Vorthak rumbled with satisfaction. Begin Phase 1 of Integration Protocol 7. Disable their satellite network but leave their planetary communication systems operational. We want them to see what's happening but feel helpless to coordinate a response. The Federation ships glided forward with elegant precision, their advanced engines producing no visible thrust. Within hours, they had reached Earth's orbital space, where humanity's modest collection of satellites waited like sitting targets. On Earth's surface, the first signs of the invasion registered simultaneously across multiple space agencies. In mission control centers from Houston to Moscow to Bangalore, technicians watched in growing alarm as their satellites simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged. They just went dark one by one as if someone had flipped a switch. Dr. Sarah Chen, director of the International Space Coordination Center, stared at her displays in disbelief. This can't be equipment failure. The odds of simultaneous malfunction across 17 different satellite systems are mathematically impossible. Her colleague, Dr. James Harrison, was already pulling up ground-based telescope data. Sarah, you need to see this. We've got 3 massive objects in high orbit. And I mean massive. They're easily the size of aircraft carriers, possibly larger. The news spread across Earth's communication networks with the speed that only modern technology could provide. Within minutes, every major government was aware that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their new neighbors had arrived with decidedly hostile intentions. Commander Vorthok observed the planet's reaction with clinical interest. Heat signatures showed increased activity in major population centers. Electromagnetic emissions indicated frantic communication between governmental facilities, and their translation computers began intercepting human broadcasts. Fascinating, Dr. Malthus observed from his position at the science station. Their leaders are actually attempting to coordinate a unified response. I've never seen such rapid adaptation to first contact among primitives. It won't matter, Vorthak replied dismissively. Begin Phase 2. Target 3 uninhabited areas with demonstration strikes. Make sure they understand our capabilities. The inevitable Dawn's weapons array charged with barely perceptible hum. Energy weapons that could vaporize starships focused on 3 carefully selected targets. An uninhabited island in the Pacific Ocean, a barren section of the Australian outback, and an empty stretch of the Sahara Desert. The strikes were precise, controlled, and absolutely devastating. Each beam carved a perfect crater exactly 1 kilometer in diameter and 500 meters deep. The energy release was visible from space, and seismic stations around the world registered the impacts as minor earthquakes. But something unexpected happened in the aftermath of the demonstration. Instead of the panic and immediate surrender that the Federation had observed on dozens of other worlds, humanity's response was unlike anything in their extensive files. President Elena Rodriguez addressed the world from an emergency session of the United Nations. Her voice steady despite the magnitude of the situation. Citizens of Earth, we face a challenge unlike any in human history. We have been visited by beings from beyond our world, and their intentions appear hostile. But we are not the same species that cowered in caves before natural disasters or surrendered to invaders throughout our history. We are humanity, and we do not kneel. Similar statements echoed from capitals around the world. Premier Chen Wei in Beijing declared that China would share all technological resources with allied nations. Prime Minister Okafor in Lagos announced that Africa's vast mineral wealth would be made available for defensive purposes. Even traditionally neutral nations like Switzerland began opening their borders to refugee populations and coordinating with former rivals. Commander, Vorthak watched these developments with growing confusion. Dr. Malthus, your psychological profile indicated that humans would fragment under pressure. Instead, they appear to be unifying? Most irregular, the doctor admitted, his tentacles writhing with scientific curiosity. Perhaps we need to apply more pressure. Their unity might collapse if we target populated areas. Sir? Lieutenant Zeltar interrupted, her crystalline structure flashing urgently. We're detecting massive electromagnetic activity across the planet's surface. It appears they're launching something. The sensors showed hundreds of primitive chemical rockets lifting off from sites around the world. Most were small. Clearly civilian satellites being hastily deployed to replace their disabled communication network, but others were larger, carrying payloads that Federation sensors couldn't immediately identify. Should we intercept? Asked Weapons Officer Krathven, his multiple arms hovering over targeting controls. Unnecessary, Vorthak decided. Let them waste their resources on pointless gestures. Perhaps watching their primitive technology fail will convince them to surrender faster. But the human launches weren't random or pointless. In secret facilities that the Federation's intelligence had never discovered, humanity had been preparing for this possibility longer than anyone realized. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence program hadn't just been looking for alien signals. They had been developing contingency plans for contact scenarios, including hostile ones. Dr. Zhang Lei, director of the classified project Prometheus, coordinated the global response from a hidden bunker beneath the Swiss Alps. Around him, the world's brightest minds worked with technology that the Federation had assumed humans wouldn't develop for centuries. Nuclear pulse engines are online, reported Dr. Volkov from the Moscow facility. We've got 12 heavy lift vehicles, Ready for launch within the hour. Fusion reactors are at full power, added Dr. Okafor from the African Deep Space Array. We can maintain full communications even with the satellite grid down. Excellent, Dr. Zhang replied, his fingers dancing across holographic displays that would have surprised the Federation observers. Phase 1 of Operation Persistence is now active. Let's show our visitors that humans have a few surprises of our own. High above Earth, the Federation ships detected the launch of what appeared to be crude nuclear-powered vessels. To their advanced sensors, the human ships looked primitive and clumsy, powered by barely controlled atomic explosions, and held together with what seemed like metallic tape and desperate hope. What they failed to recognize was that those primitive ships carried something that no species in the galaxy had ever deployed against the Federation: the collective knowledge and determination of a species that had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and thousands of years of wars against their own kind. Humanity wasn't just launching ships. They were launching everything they had learned about fighting impossible odds, and they were about to give the Galactic Federation the first real challenge it had faced in 1,000 years. Commander Vorthak watched the approaching human vessels with amused contempt, unaware that he was about to become part of a very different kind of history than he had planned to write. The first human ship to reach the Federation fleet was the Defiance, a hastily retrofitted vessel that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and sheer determination. Its hull bore scorch marks from atmospheric entry, and its nuclear pulse engines left a trail of radiation that would have been instantly fatal to most galactic species. Commander. Vorthak observed its approach with the detached interest of a scientist watching an insect. Primitive chemical weapons, basic ballistic targeting systems, and what appears to be an atomic pile for propulsion. How quaint. Sir? Lieutenant Zeltar chimed nervously. Should we destroy it before it reaches weapons range? Let it approach, Vorthak decided. I want to record its futile attack for the archives. Future integration operations can use it as an example of primitive species' inability to comprehend superior technology. The Defiance moved closer, its crude engines sputtering like an ancient combustion vehicle. Federation sensors detected multiple crude missiles being armed, along with what appeared to be kinetic projectiles, simple metal slugs propelled by chemical explosives. What the Federation didn't detect was Captain Maria Santos quietly speaking into her communication system. All human vessels, this is Defiance Actual. Beginning Protocol Omega. Let's show them what persistence looks like. The human ship opened fire with everything it had. Missiles streaked toward the inevitable dawn while railgun projectiles followed behind them. To the Federation crew, it looked exactly like what they expected: a primitive, desperate attack that would harmlessly impact their shields. The missiles struck first, their chemical explosives producing brilliant flashes against the Federation's energy barriers. The crew barely registered the impacts. But then something unprecedented happened. Sir! Lieutenant Zeltar's crystalline structure flashed alarm colors. Those weren't just explosives. They were carrying electromagnetic pulse devices. Our forward shields just suffered a 17% efficiency loss. Before Vorthak could respond, the railgun projectiles arrived. Dense metal slugs moving at significant fractions of light speed slammed into the weakened shields. Each impact caused barely perceptible damage, but there were hundreds of them, and they kept coming. Impossible, Dr. Malthus muttered, his tentacles writhing with agitation. Primitive species don't use coordinated tactics. They don't understand shield harmonics or defensive weaknesses. But Maria Santos had studied every Federation ship that had ever been recorded. Humanity's deep space observation posts had been tracking galactic civilizations for decades, analyzing their technology and looking for patterns. The electromagnetic pulse wasn't just a weapon. It was the result of 40 years of studying how energy shields responded to different frequencies. More human ships arrived, each one as crude and improvised as the first, but each one carrying weapons specifically designed to exploit the tiny weakness that the Defiance had created. They didn't attack like a military fleet. They attacked like a swarm, each ship independent but coordinated, adapting their tactics in real time based on the results of previous attacks. This is not in any of our combat protocols, Weapons Officer Krathven reported, his multiple arms moving frantically across targeting systems. They're not following standard engagement patterns. Each ship uses different weapons, different approaches. I can't predict their attack vectors. What Krathven couldn't understand was that he was facing something the galaxy had never seen before: human warfare. Not the organized, predictable conflicts between galactic civilizations, but the chaotic, adaptive, never-surrender fighting style that had been refined through thousands of years of combat against other humans. Captain Santos watched her ship's hull begin to glow from accumulated damage. The Federation's return fire was devastating, but precisely what she had expected. Engineering, how long until structural failure? 7 minutes, Captain, came the reply from Chief Petty Officer Jackson, whose voice remained steady despite the ship shaking apart around them. Good. Plenty of time. She keyed her communicator again. All ships, Defiance is about to demonstrate why humans don't believe in impossible odds. Watch and learn. The Defiance suddenly accelerated directly toward the inevitable dawn. Its engines pushed far beyond safe parameters. Federation sensors detected massive radiation spikes and structural failures throughout the human vessel. But it kept coming. They're attempting a suicide run, Dr. Melthus observed with clinical fascination. Fascinating. I've never seen such willingness to sacrifice individual survival for tactical advantage. Destroy it immediately, Vorthak ordered, but the weapons officer was already firing. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids focused on the incoming human ship, tearing through its hull and destroying its engines. But the Defiance didn't stop. Its momentum carried it forward, and as it died, Captain Santos activated her final surprise, the ship's nuclear reactor, set to overload in a specific pattern that would create a massive electromagnetic pulse exactly when the wreckage impacted the Federation shields. The explosion lit up space like a small star. When the radiation cleared, the inevitable Dawn's shields were completely offline. Its forward weapon arrays were damaged and dozens of its sensor systems were malfunctioning. Shields at 0%, Lieutenant Zeltar reported in shock. Weapons at 60% efficiency. How did a primitive atomic device cause this much damage? The answer came from the next wave of human ships, which had been waiting for exactly this moment. They opened fire with weapons that the Federation finally recognized as genuinely dangerous. Concentrated fusion beams, antimatter missiles, and kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. Sir, Krathven's voice cracked with disbelief. These weapons, they're not primitive. Some of this technology is more advanced than our own. Vorthak stared at the tactical display in growing horror. The human ships were still crude, held together with what looked like desperation and determination. But their weapons were sophisticated beyond anything in the Federation's intelligence files. What he didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this encounter for longer than the Federation realized. While they had been building their primitive rockets and chemical-fueled exploration vessels, human scientists had also been developing theoretical weapons designed specifically for fighting superior alien technology. Dr. Zhang Lei watched the battle from his hidden command center, coordinating attacks from thousands of human vessels spread across the solar system. Phase 2 weapons are performing within expected parameters, he reported to the Global Defense Council. The Federation's technology appears to follow predictable energy distribution patterns. We can exploit this, Dr. Zhang, came a voice from the European Defense Coordination Center. Our deep space sensors are detecting 2 more Federation ships moving to support their damaged vessel. Expected, Zhang replied calmly. Activate the asteroid field contingency. Let's show them what humans can do with a few rocks and some basic physics. Throughout the asteroid belt, mining robots that had been quietly repurposed over the past months began moving. Not toward Earth, but toward the approaching Federation ships, carrying payloads that would have horrified the galactic community if they had known about them. Humanity had weaponized everything: their mining equipment, their space stations, their communication satellites, even their exploration probes. Every piece of technology they had ever launched into space had been designed with the possibility that it might one day need to fight for the survival of their species. Commander, Vorthak watched his tactical display fill with new contacts. Hundreds of objects moving throughout the solar system, all converging on his position. What terrified him most wasn't their numbers, but their unpredictability. Every human ship, every weapon, every tactic was different from the last. Sir, Dr. Melthus said quietly, I believe we may have made an error in our assessment of this species. For the first time in his military career, Fleet Commander Vorthak found himself thinking about retreat. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were fighting back with a level of adaptation and determination that the Federation had never encountered, and worst of all, they seemed to be enjoying it. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Representatives from across the Federation materialized through quantum communicators, their various forms of body language all expressing the same emotion: disbelief. High Chancellor Vexthara's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in her species. Fleet Commander Vorthak explained to this council how a primitive species with chemical rockets has disabled one of our primary battle cruisers. The holographic image of Vorthak flickered slightly, interference from the ongoing battle-making communication difficult. Chancellor, our initial intelligence was incomplete. The humans possess technology that our advanced scouts failed to detect. What kind of technology? Elder Zeftok demanded, his ancient neck extending forward in disbelief. Our scouts reported they barely achieved nuclear fusion. You're telling me they've developed weapons capable of penetrating Federation shields? Not just penetrating, Vorthak admitted reluctantly. Adapting. Every attack they've made has been specifically designed to exploit weaknesses in our defensive systems. They're not fighting like any species we've encountered before. Dr. Melthas materialized beside the fleet commander's image, his tentacles writhing with scientific excitement despite the dire circumstances. Council members, what we're observing is unprecedented. The humans don't appear to have a single unified military doctrine. Instead, each of their vessels operates independently while somehow maintaining perfect coordination. Impossible, Commander Kilthvar growled. No species can maintain tactical coherence without central command. It violates every principle of military organization. Yet that's exactly what they're doing, Dr. Melthas replied. More disturbing, they appear to be learning from each engagement. Their tactics are evolving faster than our computers can predict. Senator Quilneth's insectoid features betrayed no emotion, but her words carried the weight of centuries of experience. Fleet Commander, what are your current casualties? The pause that followed sent a chill through the assembled council. In over 1,000 years of expansion, the Federation had rarely lost more than a few crew members during integration operations. The inevitable dawn has suffered 30% damage to primary systems, Vorthak reported. The Stellar Conqueror was lost with all hands when the humans somehow turned an asteroid into a kinetic weapon, moving at 12% of light speed. The Eternal Victory is currently surrounded by human vessels that appear to be disassembling it. Disassembling? Vexathara's voice reached frequencies that made several council members wince. You mean they're studying our technology while you're still fighting? Council members, came a new voice as Admiral Kothvar of the Federation's Strategic Command materialized. We need to discuss immediate reinforcement of the Sol system. I recommend deploying the 7th Battle Fleet. The suggestion sent ripples of shock through the chamber. The 7th Battle Fleet was one of the Federation's most powerful military assets, typically reserved for conflicts with other spacefaring civilizations. Admiral, Elder Yithmora spoke in her eternally calm tones. Surely you're not suggesting that 3 battle cruisers cannot handle a primitive species. Elder, with respect, that primitive species just demonstrated the ability to turn mining equipment into relativistic projectiles and somehow convinced an asteroid to change its orbit by 47 degrees. We're not dealing with primitives anymore. Dr. Melthas pulled up tactical displays for the entire council to observe. I've been analyzing their communication patterns. The humans are using their global information network to coordinate attacks in real time. Every human on their planet has access to battle data and can contribute tactical suggestions. You're telling me, Commander Kilthavar said slowly, that their entire population is participating in this conflict. Not just participating, Dr. Melthas replied. Innovating. We're intercepting thousands of messages containing new weapon designs, tactical suggestions, and modifications to existing technology. It's as if their entire species has become a single military research and development facility. The council sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. They were fighting not just the human military, but the collective intelligence and creativity of an entire planet. There's more, Admiral Kothvar added grimly. Our long-range sensors have detected similar preparations in several nearby star systems. It appears the humans sent warning messages before the attack. Warning messages. Vexthara's mandibles ceased clicking entirely.
To whom?
Unknown recipients. The messages were broadcast on wide-spectrum frequencies toward multiple star systems. We can't decrypt the contents, but the transmission patterns suggest they were attempting to contact other civilizations. Senator Quilneth processed this information with the cold logic of her species. Admiral, are you suggesting that the humans were attempting to form alliances before we even arrived? It appears so, Senator. More concerning, some of those star systems have shown increased activity since the messages were received. The Council erupted in agitated discussion. The concept of a species preparing for invasion by attempting to contact potential allies was beyond their understanding. Most primitive species either panicked or surrendered when faced with superior technology. Council members, Dr. Melthus interrupted. There's something else you need to know. We've been analyzing the human psychological profiles, and we've discovered a significant error in our initial assessment. What kind of error? Vexthara demanded. We classified the humans as an emotional species based on their attachment to other life forms and their tendency toward artistic expression. We interpreted this as weakness, making them suitable for peaceful integration. And now? Elder Zeftok asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Now we realize that their emotional nature isn't a weakness. It's the source of their tactical adaptability. They don't just fight for territory or resources like logical species. They fight for abstract concepts, freedom, dignity, the right to exist on their own terms. This makes them unpredictable. Admiral Kothvar nodded grimly. A logical species would have calculated the odds of victory and surrendered. An emotional species motivated by survival might fight desperately for a time before accepting defeat. But the humans appear to be fighting for something that makes surrender literally unthinkable. What could possibly motivate such behavior? Commander Kilthavar asked. Dr. Melthas consulted his data streams before answering. Based on their historical records, the humans appear to possess a psychological trait they call spite. When faced with impossible odds, instead of surrendering, they become more determined to prove their opponents wrong. That's not logical, Senator Quilneth observed. No, Dr. Melthas agreed. It's not logical at all, but it's extremely effective. The Council watched in real time as human vessels continued to harass the remaining Federation ships. What should have been a routine mop-up operation had become something unprecedented. A military stalemate with a species that had achieved spaceflight less than a century ago. Council members, Admiral Kothvar said quietly, we need to make a decision. Do we escalate this conflict by deploying additional fleets, or do we consider alternative approaches? The word hung in the air like a toxic cloud. In 1,000 years of expansion, the Federation had never been forced to consider alternatives to integration. They had never encountered a species that could make them seriously question whether conquest was worth the cost. High Chancellor, Vexithara looked around the chamber at representatives of 100 different worlds, all of them bound together by the simple fact that they had eventually submitted to Federation authority. For the first time in her career, she wondered if they were about to encounter a species that never would. Fleet Commander Vorthak, she said finally, maintain current positions but do not escalate engagement. This council needs time to consider our options. As the session ended, none of the council members spoke about what they were all thinking, that for the first time in galactic history, the Federation might be about to lose. Deep within the Federation's most secure research facility, Dr. Melthas worked frantically to understand what had gone so catastrophically wrong with their assessment of humanity. Around him, the galaxy's finest xenopsychologists, military analysts, and cultural experts struggled to make sense of data that contradicted every established principle of galactic civilization. Dr. Melthas called Dr. Yinthara from across the laboratory, her blue-scaled form hunched over a quantum computer display. I've been analyzing the human historical records we collected before the invasion. There's something here that doesn't match any known species development pattern. Show me, Melthas replied, his tentacles gesturing toward the main display screen. The holographic projection filled with images from human history. Ancient battles, medieval conflicts, world wars, and hundreds of smaller conflicts spanning thousands of years. To most galactic species, It would have looked like the typical violent development of a primitive civilization. Look at the pattern, Dr. Yinthara pointed out. Every other species in our database shows a clear progression from tribal warfare to regional conflicts to planet-wide war, followed by the development of a unified global government. This progression typically takes place over 10 to 20,000 years. And the humans? Malthus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The humans compressed the entire cycle into less than 5,000 years. But that's not the strange part. Look at this. The display shifted to show human conflicts from the past century. They fought 2 global wars within 30 years of each other, conflicts that should have destroyed their civilization entirely. Most species either unite or destroy themselves at that point, observed Dr. Kaelvor, whose crystalline structure chimed softly as he processed the data. The humans did neither. Exactly. Instead, they developed something unprecedented, the ability to fight total wars while simultaneously maintaining their technological and cultural development. Look at these records. They were advancing their science, creating art, and developing new technologies even while engaged in planet-wide conflicts. Dr. Malthus studied the data with growing amazement. They were fighting and innovating at the same time. No other species has ever demonstrated this capability. It gets worse, Dr. Yinthara continued. After their global wars ended, instead of forming a unified government like every other species, they maintained their separate nations but developed the ability to coordinate when faced with external threats. It's as if they kept all the advantages of diversity while eliminating the disadvantages of disunity. The laboratory fell silent as the implications sank in. The Federation had built their expansion strategy around the assumption that divided species were weak species. They had never encountered a civilization that was simultaneously fractured and unified. Dr. Malthus, came a voice from the communication array. We're receiving a priority message from the Sol system. It's unusual. Display it, Malthus ordered. The holographic screen filled with the image of an elderly human woman sitting in what appeared to be a simple office. She wore no military uniform, carried no weapons, and displayed none of the usual trappings of authority that the Federation associated with planetary leaders. Greetings, she said in perfectly clear Galactic Standard, a language that humans supposedly didn't know. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Warren Chen, and I represent the Global Defense Coordination Council of Earth. I understand you've been having some difficulties with our local customs. Dr. Kaelvor's crystalline structure flashed in confusion. How does she know our language? Our intelligence reports indicated they had no knowledge of Galactic Standard. The human woman continued as if she had heard the question. We've been monitoring your communications since your ships arrived. Your translation protocols are quite sophisticated, but not as sophisticated as you might think. We've had 3 days to analyze your language patterns and we're fast learners. Impossible, breathed Dr. Yinthara. It takes most species years to master Galactic Standard. We understand that your organization, the Galactic Federation, operates under the assumption that less technologically advanced civilizations will submit to your authority, Dr. Warren Chen continued. This assumption appears to be based on your interactions with other species that developed under different evolutionary pressures than humanity. The human woman stood and walked to a window, through which the scientists could see a city that should have been in ruins. Instead, it bustled with activity as millions of humans went about their daily lives, while simultaneously coordinating a planet-wide military defense. You see, there's something you need to understand about humans that isn't apparent from studying our technology or our social structures. We are persistence predators. Dr. Malthus felt his tentacles writhe with sudden understanding. By the void, he whispered. How did we miss this? What's a persistence predator? Dr. Kaelvor asked. A hunting strategy, Dr. Yinthara explained, her scales shifting to colors that indicated deep concern. Certain species on various worlds develop the ability to pursue prey, not by being faster or stronger, but by never giving up. They follow their target until it collapses from exhaustion. Dr. Warren Chen smiled as if she had heard the conversation. Exactly. For millions of years, humans survived by being the species that simply refused to quit. We're not the fastest, strongest, or smartest species on our planet, but we are the most stubborn. She returned to her desk and leaned forward, her expression becoming serious. This creates some interesting psychological traits that your Federation apparently hasn't encountered before. When you challenge a human, you don't just threaten their life, you challenge their fundamental nature. And humans respond to challenges in ways that other species find difficult to predict. The display shifted to show tactical feeds from the ongoing battle in space. Human ships that should have been destroyed hours ago continued fighting with improvised weapons and jury-rigged systems. Damaged vessels that any logical species would have abandoned were being held together by human crews who seemed to view mechanical failure as a personal insult. We've been studying your Federation for quite some time, Dr. Warren Chen admitted. Your expansion follows predictable patterns: technological demonstration, show of force, demands for surrender, integration of compliant populations. It's a very efficient system. How long have they been watching us? Dr. Malthus muttered. The problem is that your system is designed to work on rational species that make logical decisions based on cost-benefit analysis. Humans don't operate that way. When faced with impossible odds, humans don't calculate the probability of victory. We get angry. The camera pulled back to show the full scope of Earth's response. Every continent showed signs of massive industrial mobilization. Factories that had been producing consumer goods were now manufacturing weapons. Research facilities that had been focused on peaceful exploration were developing military technology. Even schools were teaching children how to contribute to the defense effort. You've unified our entire planet in a way that nothing in our history ever has, Dr. Warren Chen observed. Humans who have been enemies for generations are now working together, sharing technology, coordinating strategies. You've accidentally created something that hasn't existed since the very beginning of our species. A truly united humanity. Dr. Malthus realized with growing horror what she was saying. They're not just fighting back. We've given them a common purpose. Furthermore, the human continued, humans have another trait that makes us particularly unsuited to integration. We're social learners. When one human develops a solution to a problem, that solution spreads to the entire population almost instantaneously. Every tactical innovation, every technological breakthrough, every strategic insight is immediately shared with every other human fighting this war. The display showed real-time feeds of human communication networks. Millions of conversations were happening simultaneously, each one sharing information, coordinating actions, and developing new approaches to fighting the Federation. You're not fighting an army, Dr. Warren Chen explained. You're fighting an entire species that views your presence as an existential threat to everything we value. And humans who feel existentially threatened don't follow the normal rules of warfare. She paused, letting the implications sink in. We've sent this same message to every star system within 50 light-years of Earth. Some of them have already responded. It appears that the galaxy contains several other species who are dissatisfied with Federation rule. The communication ended, leaving the research facility in stunned silence. Dr. Malthus turned to his colleagues, his tentacles reflecting the deep concern that every Federation scientist was feeling. We haven't just failed to integrate a primitive species. We've accidentally started a rebellion. For the first time in galactic history, the Federation faced the possibility that their 1,000-year expansion might come to an end. And it might end because they had underestimated a species that turned stubbornness into an art form. 6 months after the invasion of Earth, High Chancellor Vexithera stood before the Galactic Council in what had become known as the emergency sessions. The Great Chamber, once filled with the confident murmur of 1,000 successful conquests, now buzzed with the nervous energy of an empire facing its first existential crisis. Council members, Vexithera began, her mandibles clicking with barely controlled stress. I call this session to address the current status of what our military historians are now calling the human conflict. The holographic displays around the chamber told a story that would have been impossible to imagine just months earlier. Red warning indicators marked 17 star systems where Federation authority was being openly challenged. Yellow caution symbols indicated dozens more where loyalty was questionable. Most shocking of all, several sectors showed complete communication blackouts, regions where Federation control had simply disappeared. Admiral Kothvar materialized via quantum communicator, his usually pristine uniform showing signs of extended combat operations. Council members, I regret to report that Fleet Groups 7, 12, and 19 have been forced to withdraw from their assigned sectors. The humans have somehow managed to provide advanced weaponry to previously subjugated species. How is this possible? Demanded Elder Zeftok, his ancient neck trembling with outrage. The humans barely had interplanetary capability 6 months ago. They still don't, Admiral Kothvar replied grimly. But they've developed something far more dangerous than advanced propulsion. They've weaponized information itself. Dr. Melthos appeared beside the Admiral, his tentacles writhing with a mixture of scientific fascination and deep concern. Council members, the humans have done something unprecedented in galactic history. They've created what they call open-source warfare. Explain, Senator Quilneth ordered, her insectoid features betraying none of the confusion that her colleagues felt. Every weapon design, every tactical innovation, every piece of technology the humans develop is immediately shared with any species willing to fight the Federation. They've turned resistance into a collaborative effort spanning multiple star systems. The implications sent a chill through the assembled representatives. The Federation's power had always rested on their technological superiority and the inability of primitive species to coordinate effective resistance. More troubling, Dr. Melthos continued, the humans appear to be teaching other species to think like humans. They're spreading concepts like persistence warfare, asymmetric tactics, and something they call the refusal to accept defeat. Commander Kilthavar's massive frame shuddered with disbelief. You're telling me that human psychology is contagious? In a sense, yes. The humans have demonstrated that Federation technology and tactics have predictable weaknesses. Once a species believes it can fight back effectively, they begin to adopt human approaches to warfare. The result is a cascade of rebellion across previously pacified sectors. Elder Yithmora, whose species had perfected the art of gentle conquest, spoke in tones that no longer carried their usual serenity. Perhaps we should consider negotiating with the humans directly. Surely we can reach some accommodation. We tried, Admiral Kothvar admitted. 3 separate diplomatic missions have been sent to Earth. The humans' response has been consistent. Which is? Vexithera asked, though she suspected she already knew. Complete withdrawal of Federation forces from all occupied systems, recognition of the right of all species to self-determination, and what they call war crimes tribunals for Federation leadership responsible for forced integration operations. The Council sat in stunned silence. No primitive species had ever demanded anything from the Federation, let alone the dismantling of their entire governmental structure. There's more, Admiral Kothvar added reluctantly. The humans have established something they call the Free Species Alliance. 14 previously integrated civilizations have declared independence and are actively fighting Federation forces. 14? Vexthara's mandibles stopped clicking entirely. In 6 months? The number grows daily. The humans have proven that the Federation can be defeated using improvised weapons and coordinated tactics. More importantly, they've proven that species don't have to accept integration simply because we possess superior technology. Dr. Melthos activated the main display, showing the current state of the galaxy. The once uniform blue of Federation space was now dotted with red zones of active rebellion and yellow areas of uncertain loyalty. Most disturbing was the steady expansion of these colored areas as the human influence spread. Council members, Dr. Melthos announced, I've completed my analysis of human psychological warfare techniques. The humans aren't just fighting for their own freedom, they're fighting for a principle they call universal liberty. They believe that no species should be forced to submit to another, regardless of technological differences. That's chaos, Commander Kilthavar protested. Without the Federation's guidance, primitive species will destroy themselves through warfare and resource competition. The humans disagree, Dr. Melthos replied. They've developed what they call cooperative security frameworks. Instead of one dominant species controlling others, they propose voluntary alliances between equals. Preposterous, Senator Quilneth stated flatly. Primitive species lack the wisdom to govern themselves effectively. The humans have an interesting response to that argument, Dr. Melthos continued. They point out that the Federation has been making that decision for other species for 1,000 years, without ever asking those species what they preferred. The concept hit the Council like a physical blow. In their 1,000 years of expansion, they had never considered that conquered species might have valid opinions about their own governance. Admiral, Vexthara said slowly. What is your professional assessment of our ability to suppress this rebellion? Admiral Kothvar paused for a long moment before responding. Chancellor, in my opinion, we cannot win a conventional war against the humans and their allies. They've demonstrated the ability to turn any piece of technology into a weapon, any tactical doctrine into a vulnerability, and any defeat into a learning experience. Then what do you recommend? Negotiation, not from a position of strength, but from a recognition that the humans represent something we've never encountered before, a species that would rather die fighting than live in submission. The council erupted in agitated discussion. The concept of negotiating with a species they had attempted to conquer was beyond their understanding. Elder Zeftok raised his ancient voice above the chaos. Council members, perhaps we should consider the possibility that the humans are correct. The chamber fell silent. Consider our own history, the elder continued. Each of our species was integrated into the Federation through force or the threat of force. We accepted Federation rule because we believed we had no choice, but the humans have proven that choice always exists. You're suggesting we abandon our entire civilization? Vexthara asked incredulously. I'm suggesting we evolve it, Elder Zeftok replied. The humans have shown us something remarkable. That cooperation freely given is more powerful than submission forcibly taken. Perhaps it's time we learned from them. Senator Quilneth processed this information with the cold logic of her species. Elder, are you proposing that the Federation transform from an empire into what the humans call an alliance? I'm proposing that we consider the alternative to transformation: extinction. The humans have made it clear that they will never stop fighting, never stop teaching other species to resist, never stop spreading their ideas about freedom and self-determination. Admiral Kothvar nodded grimly. The humans have developed something we never anticipated: the ability to make defeat irrelevant. Even if we destroyed Earth tomorrow, their ideas would continue spreading. We've accidentally created something that cannot be unconquered. High Chancellor Vexthara looked around the chamber at representatives from 100 worlds, all of them bound together by a system that had seemed unbreakable just months earlier. Now she wondered if they were witnessing the birth of something entirely new, a galaxy where species chose their own destinies. Council members, she announced finally, I propose we do something unprecedented in Federation history. Let us send ambassadors to Earth, not to demand surrender, but to ask the humans to teach us how cooperation between equals might function. The vote was closer than anyone expected, but it passed. For the first time in galactic history, a dominant civilization was preparing to learn from the species they had tried to conquer. And somewhere in the Sol system, a small blue planet continued to broadcast messages of hope and defiance to anyone willing to listen. The humans had done something that the galaxy had thought impossible. They had changed the fundamental nature of civilization itself, one stubborn act of resistance at a time. The age of empires was ending. The age of alliances had begun, and it had all started because someone asked a simple question. You invaded Earth?